My name is Jim Austin. I'm coming to you at the Stockyards Podcast Recording Studios in Fort Worth, Texas, in the historic Stockyards. My show is the Austin File, and we talk about commercial real estate. We talk about what's happening in the market. We also talk to people that are interesting, that have something to say as far as their story. And today is not unusual. We have a special guest on my show, Ron DeFore. How you doing, Ron?
I'm doing fine, Jim. Glad to be with you and your audience today.
Yeah, and this Zoom thing is cool, man. You're in Virginia, and I'm in Texas, and we're just chopping it up, talking about, what your passion is, and I'm looking forward to dig into it. And first, before we get started, I see you went to the University of Oregon and got quite an extensive communications consulting. You've owned an entrepreneur, been an owner of a company. So why don't we start telling about where you grew up, how you got to college and who you are, and maybe a little bit about your family, and then we'll jump into the book. Oh, and the name of the book is Growing Up in Disneyland.
Right. And my first caution to people is the book is not all about Disneyland. It's more of a metaphor for my life growing up in a Hollywood celebrity family. My father was the actor, Don DeFore, who is not a familiar name or even a familiar face to a lot of younger people today, unless they watch old vintage TV shows or old movies on TCM. But in the 50s and 60s, for those that were paying attention to television, Don DeFore, at least his face, was a common household face and name. In fact, I'll point back here. This photo back here is a photo from the Hazel TV series. Hazel was the maid. My dad played the part of Mr. B, her boss. And in the early 60s, it was among the top 5 TV sitcoms. Prior to that, he was Ozzie and Harriet's first next door neighbor, Mr. Thornberry, or as Ozzie called him, Thorny. And many of those reruns people still watch today. Prior to that, he starred in several productions on Broadway. He co-starred in dozens of feature films with many of the Hollywood greats, from John Wayne. He was in Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin's first picture, Doris Day's first picture. He was even in Charlton Heston's first motion picture. He made a picture with Ronald Reagan and many of the big stars. So he was a household name, and he brought us up in the west side of Los Angeles. I say Hollywood because a lot of people that don't know that area, it's kind of generic, the west side of Los Angeles. In a little known place called Brentwood, which a lot of people know where Brentwood is. It was a nice area. He built a really nice home that we grew up in. So I feel very blessed to have grown up in that atmosphere, but even more blessed that my father, even though he did pretty well, he brought us up very conservatively. And, when I wanted my Fender guitar and amp, I had to convince him that I would take lessons, and I had to borrow the money and work it off by mowing the lawn. And I didn't like that when I grew up, because I had neighbors of other famous actors or directors or producers, and all they'd have to do is snap their fingers and they'd get what they want. Well, as I write about in my book, what I saw happen as I got older is those people, many of them are not with us today. Many of them stayed living with their parents because they didn't know how to take care of themselves. Some died of drug overdoses. So I really feel quite blessed to have been brought up very conservatively, because when I became of age to go to college, 18, I was independent. I knew how to earn my own money. So life was pretty good, but I didn't get a college degree. I started working in the mail room of KTLA TV after 2 years of college at the University of Oregon. And by the end of the summer, I'd been promoted up 2 different positions. And I had to decide, do I want to go back to college to learn broadcasting or just stay in it? And I made the decision to stay in it. And so at the ripe old age of 20, I became the associate director of the Steve Allen Show, which at the time was a national syndicated talk show. And from there, I had about 20 other careers. I just kept bouncing around, and it's just wherever the wind blew me. And some of those stops were very exciting and quite unusual. And that's why over time, people have said, God, you ought to write a book. So I wrote a book.
Well, your background in having a legend like your daddy in your life. Did you have brothers and sisters?
I have a brother and 3 sisters, yes.
Yeah. No, I'm a team. I enjoy TV, and I know I remember seeing that show back in the day. I've always been a TV movie fanatic, and the fact that your dad was who your dad was in that relationship, and then you going on and piggybacking on your love and what he's done. So I look forward to reading your book thoroughly, and I'm so excited for you to be tied in with Walden Books, because Barbara, Terry is such a fresh of breath air. I guess I'm saying it right. Yeah. So she's a personality, and we talk all the time because she lives right across the street from me, and she's I'm excited for you to be into her book line. So right now, how long has your book been on the market? Where can we find it? And maybe you can hit on some of the high points in your book, why someone should go out and purchase it.
Sure. If I can just show the cover here. Again, it's growing up in Disneyland. There's some photos of my dad in his better known roles in Hazel and Ozzie and Harriet. You can get it anywhere. Amazon, you can order it directly from Waldorf Publishing. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles. Until this virus hit us all, I was doing a number of book signings around the Virginia, Maryland area. But before writing this book, I never thought that I would write a book. In fact, when I got into public relations a couple decades ago, one of my greatest fears was writing, which is a big stumbling block for public relations, because a lot of it is writing. But I worked very diligently at learning from other people. When I was in the federal government, I had a deputy that was one of the best writers I ever came across, and I would study how he would edit my writing and learn from that. So the book, Growing Up in Disneyland, is a metaphor for my life, having grown up in this celebrity atmosphere, but it also is literal, as my dad was the only person to own a restaurant inside of Disneyland bearing the name of a real live person. The name of the restaurant was Don DeFore's Silver Banjo Barbecue in Frontierland. And it was a 5-year lease. So right in the sweet spot of my youth, from 7 years old to 12, we were down at Disneyland more times than I wanted to. In fact, one of the chapters, it is titled, "Gee, do we have to go to Disneyland again?" So I do caution that the book, the title can throw people off. I want them to know that it's not all about Disneyland. However, there are 3 wonderful chapters talking about our beginning with Disneyland was Walt, who was a very good friend of my dad's, inviting our whole family to be in the opening day parade, July 17th, 1955, which was broadcast nationally, narrated by Ronald Reagan, Art Linkletter, Bob Cummings. And we were in the Autopia cars in the parade riding up Main Street. So that was the beginning relationship with Walt Disney. And I must tell one little story. The Disney legal department didn't allow me to put the photo in, but I have the photo of this story. And it was one Christmas, right before the Christmas parade was supposed to start. In those days, they'd have a celebrity in each land, and my dad was always Frontierland. So right before the parade was going to start, somebody yelled up at my dad and said, hey, Don, Walt Disney's on the phone for you. So my dad had to come downstairs, takes the phone. He says, yeah, Walt, what's up? He says, well, I'm at the front gate and we got to get this parade going. My grandchildren haven't shown up. Did you bring your kids? And my dad said, yeah, sure. And so he says, send a couple down to the front gate. So I have these great 3 black and white photos of my sister and I riding in a horse-drawn carriage with Walt Disney waving into the parade. That was one of my favorite things. So the book, again, goes through not only my dad's career, which is about the first third of the book. And the neat thing is that it's in his own words. He had been working on his own autobiography, but when he finished, he passed away 3 months later. So it was never published. So this was my opportunity to really get a lot of his writing out in the public. And so even though I interspersed some of my narrative to put things in context, a lot of that first third is my dad walking through the high points of his career. And then it gets into my perspective of growing up in the 50s and 60s and my 20 careers or so. And ultimately, as you had mentioned, forming my own public relations firm in Washington, D.C. That became pretty successful.
Well, I was going to ask you, had you ever met Walt Disney? And you answered my question before I was able to ask. And that is just a great story, because, oh my God, I mean, if you look at the movie industry and where it's at now and where it was then, he was just such a visionary that brought Hollywood to light. And your story is just so empowering. Let me ask you one quick question. What about Mom? How did Mom fit in all this? Because behind every great man, there's a great woman. So I don't want to miss Mom in this story. So
yeah, that's an excellent question because I have a chapter on her, and okay. Her influence on me obviously is very important. But I won't make the story too long. But basically, my dad was starring on Broadway in a play. Where do we go from here? And it was then going to go touring around the country. And right before they left, one of the people that worked on the production said, oh, you have to stop in when you're in Chicago and say hi to my best friend, Marion Holmes. She's a singer with, at that time, with the Art Castle Orchestra. And they play every Saturday night at the Biltmore Hotel in Chicago. So anyway, long story short, my dad and the whole company are out doing the play in Chicago. It's a big hit. And he winds up, getting a whole table right in front. They meet, they get together for a couple of times after that. And ultimately, Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1942, they marry. And wow. So she was in the entertainment business as well. She not only sang with Art Castle, but also sang with Henry Bussey, Krupa was a drummer at one time, and she did a lot of recording. And here's the last punchline. My mom recorded and made I'm a Little Teapot famous. So that's her input.
Hey, you know, I mean, some people are blessed. Hey, Ron, you're very blessed to be brought up in that environment, and that you've taken the time to expand that history with this book. And I'm going to make sure that I get out and get a copy of it. And I think I could probably talk to you for a couple hours about the history of how you grew up and what has happened in your life, sir. And
well, you know, to that point, my brother and I have given presentations to various Disney enthusiast groups for the last 20 years. In fact, we did the very first D23 convention, which is now become the huge ABC Disney convention in Anaheim every other year. Well, we did the first one, and we also did the third one. In talking about this unusual part of Disneyland, I mean, for Disney history enthusiasts, it's unbelievable. I go to one of their convention, and it's like being William Shatner walking into a Star Trek convention. I mean,
and I'm a Star Trek fan. I mean, when I was in college, I've seen every one of them. So
me too.
You know, yeah.
I did too. And so what we did is we did so many of these groups where you'd have the same people at the same presentation. I said to my brother, I said, we need to keep on adding and changing. And people have told me they want to hear some of the stories beyond Disneyland, beyond your restaurant, because you guys have had so many different experiences, like getting to meet the Beatles, you know, at a private party in Brentwood, you know. So as we started adding these things, people started saying, God, you got to keep on going. You should write a book. And so, you know, I have. I finally did. And I have to say that the main and only reason I wrote this book was to be a tribute to my father, Don DeFore, who me and many other people feel was underrated and underappreciated at the time that he was here. I have a fan site on Facebook, the Don DeFore Fan Club, and many people are posting all the time. And one of the most common comments is that he was underrated, you know. And so this is my way of giving a tribute to my dad, and especially I'm so glad I thought of including his own manuscript. So he finally got it published.
Well, what I would like to do, and my producer's saying I got to start wrapping it up, I would like to talk to you about possibly a partnership. My Jim Austin online network newsletter goes out to 10,000 folks. I own an event center here, which we put in a production and recording studio, and we are shooting some movies right now, and would love to talk to you about my museum and, you know, the things that I'm doing to see where the synergy meets, that we could do some conferences on movies and the Disney and just your whole background that you and your brother have built. So what I'll do is, with our podcast, we'll slice it up. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel, and they'll let you share it with some folks. And then maybe offline, we can talk about bringing some of that mix to Dallas-Fort Worth and the world, and within my connection and what I do. So I'm sitting here just, you know, taken aback about your history and your dad and your mom. I'm glad I asked about mom, because I knew there had to be somebody special in the mix. So let's do this. Do a shout out where you know, if someone wanted to contact you, where they can get the book. And then I will call you back again offline and see how we can do something. And I'll talk with Barbara and see how we can connect. But I've enjoyed listening to you, sir.
Well, I would love to pursue that, Jim. And for those that want to learn more about the book, it's growing up in Disneyland.com. And I've got reviews. I've also got a 5-minute video that walks through the main points of the book. And there's also links to purchase the book. There's also a link to my contact information, and also a link to those that may want an autographed copy from me. So growing up in Disneyland.com.
Hey, this is brought to you by Jim Austin Online, powered. This is my podcast, The Austin File. I've enjoyed talking with you thoroughly. We will share this interview with the world, and I know someone's going to reach out to you, my friend.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks everybody for checking in. We're going to stop the recording right now.